This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Artisanal Agency, the exclusive representative of the This Week in Tech podcast network. Reach Twit.tv's tech-savvy, affluent, highly engaged audience by booking your campaign now. Visit artisanalagency.com to find out more. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 572, Pepsi Fluid. For Monday, December 16th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Does the customer lifecycle model still apply? Some forward-thinking marketers suggest that it doesn't. For them, every customer journey is unique, and we should rely entirely on technology to personalize each experience. Are they right? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, why brands need to embrace non-binary gender roles in ads, understanding gamer audiences, whether Facebook is getting too expensive, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal of the Idea Integration Company, the one and only Mr. Saul Colt. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
I'm well. Now, also with us, we have the Vice President of Customer Experience at Gartner, Mr. Augie Ray joins us. Hi, Augie.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on again.
Yeah, a pleasure. A pleasure to have you both on. As usual, we have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump right into the first topic and get us started. The customer lifecycle. It's a kind of a model we all know, and it's one that many of us have pretty much lived and breathed for most of our careers. But the question is, what if it no longer applies? Or worse yet, what if it never applied? There's an opinion piece in Forbes this week that takes issue with customer journey models as a whole, suggesting that they are antiquated at best, and that smart marketers need to accept that every customer is different, and so their journey needs to be personalized as well. Augie, let me ask you just point blank, do you believe this to be true? And if so, what do we do with this knowledge? I mean, it's one thing to say that the customer lifecycle model is old and antiquated. It's another thing to say, we've got the technology, we've got the ability to do anything about it. What's your take?
Yeah, I generally do not agree with this article. There are some interesting things that are embedded in the article that I liked. By and large, it demonstrates to me a certain bias that I see that is very common in marketing agencies and in many marketers, where they think of the journey as something that they need to prescribe, that they need to manage and optimize, and that usually involves specific touch points and specific channels, as if we can shepherd everyone through. And so because that is ridiculous in this day and age, it causes people to say that we should throw out the whole idea of customer journeys. But that's equally insane, because we know people go through processes. They go through processes when they become aware of and consider things, and different people are going to evaluate in different ways. And so we don't need to throw out the journey just because we're moving to a more one-to-one marketing world or one-to-one service world. At the same time, we still have to be able to think of grouping people together based on their needs, their expectations, and their wants, and understanding something at a high level about how they go through the journey, what drives their satisfaction and dissatisfaction. And ultimately, the idea of journey mapping isn't to prescribe something. It's actually a tool for understanding something. So if we understand the way people go through journeys, what drives satisfaction and dissatisfaction, then we can identify where we have broken touch points or where we have missing touch points, and that can drive where we put our focus. So to me, this was an agency-oriented sort of way of thinking about it. It was from an agency owner who wants to sell agency services. So, of course, he talks up the idea of these value experiences, which is terrific. I mean, we should be thinking about that. But the idea of the journey is to know where you need the right value creating experiences. So I think there are some things that are missing in this, but, it's a provocative piece. It gets people thinking.
Well, it got me thinking
So,
about over-reliance of it. And just 1 second, Saul, I'll go to you in a
yeah.
second. For me, what I got out of this article and what made me think about is, are we over-relying on customer life cycles and customer journeys? Because every customer is different, every experience is unique with a brand. Just putting them in the buckets, like now you're in awareness, now you're in knowledge, now you're a loyalist, now you're an advocate. Does that make us lazy as marketers? And do you think that we maybe should be expanding our mind a little bit beyond those boundaries?
Well,
yes.
go ahead, Saul.
Well, so I actually agree with everything Augie said, but just for the sake of entertainment value, I'm going to play the opposite side of the coin and say, customer journeys are really kind of like, essentially they've been reduced to horoscopes. You look like this, you're going to do this, you've done this, we deliver you this. And the idea of thinking that there's only 12 different people in the world, and I'm using 12 based on horoscopes just to keep my lazy analogy alive here. It's not necessarily the way we do it with customer journeys, but to think that there's however many billion people on the planet, and they're all going to act in a similar way to a small group of different variables is kind of crazy, because and I'd even go as far to say that and again, I'm playing advocate here, so I'm not sure if I really believe this either, but hopefully it'll spark the conversation, is that we've become, and again, this also agrees exactly with what Bob said about over reliance, because it's like, so I got a puppy 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
And
congratulations, a dog owner.
thank you. All I've been getting served now are puppy ads, like puppy beds and leashes and streetwear for puppies and all this stuff, and I'm a sucker, I'm buying all of it. But it's so fascinating to see how over controlled the experience is, because there's a lot of brands out there that really don't understand the people anymore, and they're trying to just push you through a funnel and push you through this or push you through that, and so I think I might actually be
I think you talked yourself all the way around to agreeing with me.
I agreed with you from the beginning, so it's hard not to agree with you. So I'll finish my thought, and then we can all pat ourselves on the back. But the experience is so shitty or so sloppy. Sorry, Bob. That people are just pushing so many bad products on the internet right now, and they're hoping that you get trapped in funnels and trapped through bad experiences, that they're not even trying to worry about the product anymore or what the customer even thinks anymore.
See, but that's what I was saying, though, about focusing about the marketer focus on the journey, right?
Yeah.
If you're trapped in a funnel, that's because a marketer is really focused on getting you to buy. That is the path to purchase in the acquisition journey. The things that marketers get wrong about customer experience and customer journey is that it's an end-to-end thing. It isn't just about the acquisition, it's about what happens after. And that by grouping people together, it's not about shoving them through a funnel or showing them the same ad or thinking that they're going to move from this ad to that website to that application to this email communication. Nobody gets anything that prescribed. It's ultimately about understanding what I need to do better to serve a group of people with similar needs. It's not about assuming they all have similar needs, but think about like the auto industry. Should the auto industry do custom cars one-to-one? Makes no sense, right? It's not economically sensible. So why do we group around sports cars and family sedans and vans and SUVs? And it's a pretty simple example I'm using here, but the idea is that we need to, at some level, group people together based on needs and wants to know that we are going to produce the experiences that meet large numbers of people's needs. Now, that doesn't prevent us from then personalizing the advertising, personalizing the servicing. People can go into their dealership, and they can get the colors they want and the features they want. There's plenty of personalization, but at the base of it, we have to understand how we can serve and address the needs and wants and expectations of groups of people in order to plan our communications, our targeting, our product, our service strategy. So, to me, it's not a mutually exclusive thing. I've just seen the development of personas and the use of end-to-end journeys, again, not to prescribe things like you're talking about, not to throw ads at people, but to understand, what does the customer expect of us, and are we providing that experience? And if not, where is it breaking down? So one of the things I like to talk about is the difference between what people use the term customer journey all the time, or customer journey mapping, but they mean different things. And I've found this in working through, with over 1,000 clients now at Gartner over the last 4 years or so. But you have to define, are you talking about customer journey management or optimization, where you think because somebody has done X, Y, and Z, you should now serve them this, and they should see that on your website, and they should get this email? Because of course there are lots of tools out there, customer journey optimization tools, that will claim to help to do that. That's one way of thinking about the customer journey. It's not my way. Or are you using the customer journey to really understand what people want and need, and thus develop a strategy for bridging those gaps? And to me, that's a very different thing.
Part of this for me, this article, it feels like it stems from the fantasy that we've been peddling in marketing for some time, which is that we really can get to that one-to-one marketing opportunity where the individual is perfectly satisfied. And I know you gave the example of the trucks and GM or Ford, and how we can't really have a personalized vehicle for everybody. But in marketing, we have been saying for some time that we're going to get there with technology. We're going to be able to provide a unique experience for everybody with programmatic creative and programmatic targeting and programmatic everything. Is that a fantasy? Is that something that we'll ever really get to? Is that something that we just need to stop talking about, and we need to understand that personalization will never be true personalization? It's going to be bucket personalization, where we're going after certain groups at certain triggers in their life cycle.
My peer Andrew Frank talks about personification as opposed to personalization, and the idea that these two things are not mutually exclusive. A good strategy is always going to have some level of personification to it, and what we want to do is strive to get as close as possible to one-to-one marketing. But we all know the challenges of the cleanliness of our data, and the risks of creepiness, because we capture so much data, and even saw you talking about the ads chasing you around because you got the dog. I mean, there are limitations to personalization that we have to understand, and they exist because our technology isn't very good, and it exists because human beings are human beings. And so, to me, that's where journeys and personas come in, as they bridge the gap for whatever percentage you might think it is that we can't get to with actual one-to-one marketing.
So I didn't actually finish the thought about the ads chasing me around. I'll walk away from it now, but I think the thing that's really missing in all this conversation of personalization and personification, or whatever word you use, is that really great, and I'm speaking just from the creative side here, but really great creative leaves a lot to the imagination without leaving a lot to be desired. And I think that you can't really push personalization as one-to-one if you want to have really great creative. No matter how great the AIs are and all this stuff, it all leaves it to things. So, when you think of the, we're striving for one-to-one, but the best creative is when you see yourself in it, not personalized by just slapping a "Hey Bob" and "Hey Augie" on an intro screen. It's when you really hit that mark, and I believe that does require a lot of personification as opposed to personalization. So I'm agreeing with you again, but I really think that and I say this every time I'm on the show, I realize I'm a broken record, but I'm really, stubborn about my beliefs. I really think we're trying to go so away from the emotional IQ of marketing with all this programmatic and all that stuff, and we're trying to go away from actually nailing what people care about. That I think does fall into the customer journey. I'm a big believer in customer journey at the very, very beginning. So for concept testing and for a lot of testing, absolutely customer journey is the way I believe to do it. But once it's out in the world and it becomes so forced, you're going to be pushed in that direction or that direction. I think that's where there's so few brands doing it really, really well. The ones that do it well are great, and it's seamless, and you don't realize that you're being put through a maze of some sorts. But going back to my lazy story of the pet stuff, it was such a clunky experience, and that if you actually read all the comments were so negative towards these brands because the experience was so poor and because they were trying to control everything. And it really shows that we're pushing towards being these technically advanced marketers, but so few of them do it really well, and it backfires against your brand if you're not doing it well.
Yeah, I like where you started off on that right from the beginning. I've been kind of sitting on this comment, but the idea of great creative, there's a place in this world for choose your own novel, choose your own ending novels, or whatever they're called, choose your own path. I always forget the name of those books. Never was a big fan, but choose your own journey books, and then great classic novels. I mean, there's a place for each of those things in the hierarchy, and I think that great creative is the same thing. Great ad creative can inspire you, even if it's not targeted at you. It can make you feel like this is something that I've secretly wanted to do. It's an aspiration for me, or it's something I never thought of for myself. It creates possibilities, and I think that this is where we need to be, is somewhere in that balancing act between the personalization and the opportunity creation, discovery that was such an elusive force in advertising and marketing. So I totally agree with that. But Augie, just to wind up this topic, I mean, the role of classic models in strategy and planning, how do we best use those going forward? Is it all about just looking for the opportunity to shape our? Well, I mean, I'll leave the question there. I mean, it's just like, are classic models, where do they fit in the strategy and planning process today? Are they still the ultimate force in terms of guiding things, or are they something that needs to be adjusted and evolved in order to create the kind of personalization opportunities that are available today via technology?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that. I'll do my best. I'll just say that I do think that I see a lot of brands turning away from some of these, as you point out, classic models, these classic tools of personas and journey maps, because sometimes they struggle to use them. Sometimes they do them wrong. I mean, easily over half of the journey maps I see are process maps, not journey maps, where organizations are really just mapping all the processes they want people to go through to, buy something or shop for something or get service, whatever it may be. They're really not doing it from the customer's perspective. It's not the customer's journey or their desired journey. And so the thing that I feel is that these tools still have enormous value. They don't get in the way of personalization. In fact, they can really help personalization at some point. I mean, when somebody comes to your site and you don't know what they want yet, what they represent, what their wishes are, you can still make evaluations based on those first couple of clicks, and that's going to put them down a path based on a persona, for instance. But the thing that ultimately I would love to make sure that I communicate, because I get this opportunity on your show, is that focusing on the path to purchase and only on creative, what can we do to get people to buy? I mean, that's classic marketing, and we need to do that. We need to do that effectively. But ultimately, what customer experience is about, my area of expertise, is not just what gets people to buy, but what happens after. Do you keep them? Do you grow them? Do they cross-sell and upsell? Do you earn that relationship? And to bring it back to what Judd Marcello said in this interview, I may not agree with him about journeys overall, but he talked about different types of loyalty, the difference between habitual and emotional loyalty. And I think that's one of the things we need to be focused on, which is, what do we need to do to really drive people to be loyal? And that's not going to be chasing people with ads. It's not going to be, personalized emails. That's as much about what we do as what we say. And that's really where journeys work well, and where marketers typically kind of drop the ball. because they're so focused on those sort of short-term financial conversion, sales, acquisition, leads sorts of metrics instead of that longer-term emotional loyalty.
I'm glad you brought that
I
up.
believe it still stands. Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, and it's a perfect way to end that particular topic, because there is a difference between loyalty. Just because they're buying from you over and over again doesn't make them emotionally loyal to your brand. And I think a lot of brands do not understand that, or at least don't pay attention to that fact in their marketing. So good point. Well, we're going to move on, and we're going to talk next about the non-binary world that's coming face to face with brands. People don't like to be identified as being male or female anymore, especially in younger generations, and it's becoming a challenge for brands as they put out ads. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, because it is that time of year. It's the planning season. We're getting ready for 2020. We're looking for new medias. We're looking for new opportunities to get new audiences with lots of disposable cash. Well, I've got an audience for you that is arguably the most responsive and lucrative technology-minded audience out there. Our sponsor, Artisanal Agency, is the exclusive representative for Twit.tv, the This Week in Tech podcasting network, one of my favorite networks out there, and quite frankly was the inspiration for me starting this show. We're talking about shows like MacBreak Weekly, iOS Today, Windows Weekly, This Week in Tech, of course, the big granddaddy of them all. And that's just 4 of their amazing shows, all of which generate phenomenal results for their sponsors. Now, the proof's in the pudding. Let's look at the numbers here. 50 million downloads a year. It sound good to you? That's a lot of people listening to this network. 70% of that audience directly works in tech, and 82% of them say that they have bought a product directly as the result of a Twit.tv ad recommendation. Now, that shows that this network not only has the audience and the chops and the type of audience that you want, but they also have the kind of recommendations that people respond to. And remember, they are offering an actual live read recommendation here, and they take that responsibility very seriously. Now, how seriously? It's all through the vetting. Not just anyone can advertise on Twit.tv. Artisanal Agency will vet you. They vet every single sponsor so that their hosts can offer your brand a genuine recommendation, while you can relax knowing that there won't be any brand safety issues down the line. And it doesn't matter whether you're coming in with a completely baked campaign or need everything from graphics to ad copy help. Artisanal Agency makes it easy for you either way. They ensure your campaign will run seamlessly, from onboarding hosts to delivering creative assets to monitoring your ad reads. Now, all I'm asking you to do is reach out today and find out more information. Reach out to reach out to artisanalagency.com. Twit.tv is where they're representing. Let me get this straight. Visit artisanalagency.com to find out more. Find out how you can start your campaign on the Twit.tv network, or email them directly at hello@artisanalagency.com. That's hello@artisanalagency.com. Start your next podcast ad campaign with a show from Twit, and we thank them very much for their support of our show, the BeanCast. Well, for most millennials and many of us even older generations, we've accepted a binary world in advertising. There are products that are for men, there are products that are for women, and there are products for both. But younger people are more fully embracing the non-binary identities. Everything from pronoun changes to trying to look a part that is more somewhere in between the sexes that we've for so long have embraced. And brands that are behind the curve on this massive cultural shift may face some serious long-term consequences from audiences that are expecting a more fluid approach to gender bias. So, Saul, why do brands need to be concerned about this issue? What's your take on the movement of not only younger generations, but people of all ages to embrace this approach where we're not identifying ourselves as male or female? How should brands respond to this?
Guys, so one brand that's all over this, I read this morning that Pepsi is launching a new soda called Gender Fluid. Did you guys get
That's
that?
a good joke. Yeah. It's kind of a groaner,
right.
but I'm going with it.
All right. And that's all I have to say about this topic, for fear of saying the wrong thing. Just kidding. You know, it, it used to be, like you'd sit around in a boardroom or something, and all you had to do to sort of like protect yourself as a brand was have a mixed race couple in your ads. But now it's a much longer conversation, and like you said, Bob, there are some companies that are right on top of it and doing it really well. And by doing it really well, I think that means that I'm going to oversimplify this, but it really means be human, and don't look at a non-binary population as an opportunity. You shouldn't just invest in Pride Month, invest in all year round. Yeah, MasterCard lets people put whatever name they want on the front of their card, which solves a real pain point for some non-binary members of the population. United Airlines lets you identify as male, female, or X and U, and I'm not going to pretend that I know what X and U stands for, so I just telling you what I read this morning. But it really comes down to like be human, and
Yeah,
it's
I get,
about like I sort of lost my train of thought, but it's really about not looking at it as an opportunity, not looking at it as opportunistic. If you're a brand that actually believes in something, let people know what you believe in. If you're a brand that actually stands for something, there's been so many surveys recently that say that people want brands to actually stand up and stand for something. So if
well,
this is what you believe in, stand for it. If
can
it's
I
not
ask
what
a
you believe
question
in,
though?
then
Does it need to be a stance? Does it need to be some kind of political stance, or does it
It
need to
actually
just be
no.
just an acceptance of a reality within your market?
Yeah. Well, obviously, advertising always has to be culturally relevant to whoever the target is, and that that's standard advertising since the beginning. But I think you make a great point, which is, I mean, there is this idea of making a stand. I mean, this week as we're talking, Hallmark is facing some backlash, of course, because a very mild ad featuring two women getting married and having a very chaste kiss was rejected, and that's annoyed a lot of people.
Well,
And
rejected from
so
Hallmark Network. Let's be clear, it wasn't
rejected,
rejected.
sorry, from the Hallmark network.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I'm not telling the story right. And Hallmark, of course, as a result, the network is facing some backlash for that, some support for that. But sometimes these things creep up on you because it may not be a stand. It may just be something that you have to decide whether it fits your audience or not. But I think there are subtle ways, though, of addressing these things. I think of, have you seen I'm sure everyone has the Samsung Star Wars ad with the Chewy dog, and the child sees a Chewy dog and he wants his dad to adopt the dog, and the dad doesn't want to, and then by the time they get there, the dog is adopted and they end up seeing a Darth Vader cat. The thing that I find interesting about that is that a boy or a girl in that ad? And the right answer is it doesn't matter. But I think there was a time that brands might have not wanted to have an actor or actress, particularly in a child role, that wasn't so cisgender, right? It is in fact a girl. I thought it was a boy, and I find it interesting. To me, this is a step that Samsung has taken, I believe deliberately, I don't know, to try to show a little more gender fluidity. And in the end, who cares? It's a child and his dad and a dog or a cat, right? That's the only thing that matters in this ad.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I mean, not to take away from you, Saul, because I mean, you make a lot of great points about a brand having to address these issues and face the beliefs that they have about their community and their audience, and to make sure that they're servicing these audience members. But at the same time, what Augie's saying rings very, very true to me. That it's just like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a cause. It just needs to be an acceptance of the fact that you have a large portion of your audience that no longer identifies in a binary way, either male or female. So you need to address that. I guess the big question that I still have for you guys is this simply a matter of pronoun awareness? Is it about casting? Or are the challenges even more far-reaching? Saul, you're breaking up a little bit. I know you're trying to answer, so you might need to fix. I'll go to Augie while Saul wrestles with his internet connection. But
well,
Hi.
first of all,
you're back.
back.
You're back. Saul.
I was just going to say to use another term, like, and I don't think we've said this yet on this topic, but it comes down to like being authentic. I've sort of said being human, but it really comes down to being authentic. Because I think there are some brands who probably should hear this topic and don't care.
So you're having some real problems with your internet. So I'm going to go to Augie. Maybe you might need to restart, but go ahead, Augie. Let's hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, part of it is that you have to figure out how edgy a brand you want to be. Whoop.
Saul, you need to drop off and reconnect. Okay. We can't get rid of Saul. Saul, you need to reconnect, and we'll get.
Okay, he's saying.
Yeah, Saul, you're really breaking up. So why don't you restart or something, and we'll get Augie to answer this question for now, but we'll get you back in a second.
Okay.
But Augie, you take it away.
Yeah, well, I think brands have always got to ask all sorts of things, right? Who am I aiming for? How edgy do I want to be? As you point out, do I want to take a stand or do I not want to take a stand? I think these are all things that we have to ask ourselves. Obviously, if you're going to be focused on a younger millennial audience, I think you need to have these in mind, these issues in mind when you're thinking about, as you point out, casting, storylines, all those sorts of things. There are other brands that I think are going to try to be appealing, obviously, to what they think of as more traditional family values, and they're going to want to avoid those things, right? And so, to me, it's just a matter of knowing who your brand is and knowing your audience and being true to it. I do think, though, what maybe Saul was suggesting is that these things are going to creep up on brands. I know there were brands that didn't want to take a stand on whether people could bring guns into a store, but somebody eventually shows up with a gun. You have to take a stand. Are they allowed in, or do you say no guns are allowed in? And so brands can't really avoid taking a stand on some things. And again, I would use the Hallmark Channel example as an example where they decided this was not appropriate for their audience, but a whole lot of their audience disagrees. So I think that it's important that brands think about where they want to stand on these issues, even if they aren't going to take a stand. And then I think their advertising, and beyond their advertising, their policies, their employee policies, their customer policies, have to reflect those things that they believe. So I think we've got to be thoughtful. And I think that's what Saul was trying to get at with authenticity and honesty.
Yeah, and I think that, to take that even further, we need to start looking at the broader product discussion. I mean, it's not just the fact that we need to have casting situations figured out and gender pronouns and figure out what our beliefs are on this particular subject. But we also need to look beyond that to what kind of products are we creating? Are we creating products for men and women? Or are we creating products that are for people? And I think that gets to the heart of what Saul was initially talking about, was that idea that we need to get back to human advertising, and we need to be less about the genders in terms of our product creation and about our approaches to how we message these products.
I think I can bring our two topics together, personalization and these gender issues, and it's a wonderful story. My wife worked at a women's clothing store. This goes back 2-3 decades, and a gentleman wanted to come in and shop for himself, and was concerned about how he could do so. And so on a regular basis, the manager would keep the store open late so he could come and do the shopping he wanted for the clothes that he wanted in this store. And at the time, this is probably back in the 80s, it felt a little unusual, but what a wonderful way of thinking about commitment to a customer. And it just seems to involve some of these issues. And back in the 80s, they had to keep a store open. Nowadays, I would think a lot of stores, there wouldn't be any issue. And for a lot of shoppers, there might not be any issue any longer. But these are the things that we have to address in a world where gender is not quite so binary. For what it's worth, I identify as a male, he, him, his.
It's worth a lot. I mean, you got to identify with what you know and who you are. Saul, we got you back finally. What want to take up on your thought that you were trying to share before?
I just assumed that Augie covered it, but I think just forget it. Let's move on.
Okay, well, we got another one for you. We're going to move on to the next topic. For most people in marketing, gamers as an audience fall into neat little groups. They're either casual gamers, mobile gamers, hardcore gamers, real simple. But the reality is, these buckets do a really terrible job of understanding and explaining the complicated world of gaming opportunity that's available to marketers. So, why do marketers have such a difficult time dissecting this audience and understanding it? I mean, it's like marketers are gamers too. A lot of them are. Why? I mean, almost everybody is some sort of gamer, whether you're on your phone or dealing with a console or whatever. Why is it that we have such a trouble trying to figure this audience out and market to them?
Well, because I think that there's so many different types of games and so many different types of gamers, if we want to call them. And I think it also, I'm not sure we have a clear definition of what a gamer is. Are we talking about people who play Candy Crush, or are we talking about people who, are into Grand Theft Auto? And there's probably a ton of overlap. But
I can take
from
you
a
even further than that. I mean, it's just like I've heard people recently talking about gamers and say we need to address the fact that people who play board games are gamers. People who religiously play Scrabble are gamers. And we need to think about what that means to the way that we market everything. Being a gamer changes the way you think about the world. And it's something that can be leveraged as a marketer.
hmm that being said, we'll take the board games out of this, Bob. But there's gaming is huge. There's something like 2.4 million people playing board games, but like TV programming, and there's probably more people on games than on traditional broadband television. It's all based on the genre, the content, the game. I play NBA 2K and nothing else. So does that make me a gamer? I don't know because
It does.
well, so I guess I'm part of that 2.4 million. But I don't want to be targeted as a gamer. You send me, marketing messaging around gaming, and I'm just going to assume it's not for me because I don't think of myself as a gamer, even though I play this like one and only game. But as a marketer, I could tell you, I think that and I have nothing else to base this on. So maybe they don't do a good job, but I actually think the 2K franchise does an incredible job of, targeting marketing from both sides of the spectrum. From an ad perspective, if I want to have Nike sneakers on my players on NBA 2K, I have to go to Foot Locker and buy them and spend real world money inside of this game to do that. So they're getting money from me, but because I want Nike sneakers, and they're getting money from Foot Locker and Nike and JBL headphones, and like there's 800 brand messages inside of these games. So obviously there's brands that know that this is where people are populating. This is where people are spending money. This is where people are like in a mood to spend money because they're sitting in a chair not moving for 4 hours, and their synapses are firing so crazily that they're willing to accept any message given to them and act on them and be impulsive. But I still don't think brands really know who's playing the game, except for the fact that if I'm playing a basketball game, I'm probably a basketball fan. But what does that say about me if I'm playing a game where I'm shooting people in the head from 800 yards and stuff like that? Like I don't think we know enough about the demographics of people who are playing these games, other than like, what does Microsoft know about me based on my Xbox purchase? They've got my email address and phone number, so they cross-reference that. They know that they also have me on Skype. They also have me on Windows 360, and I've got a Office account. But what do they really know to target these people? And most video games are a group thing in their home. So who's actually playing? There's 100 reasons why I think it's hard for marketers to even understand who the gamers are.
And there's also the fact that when you're talking about your audience, you're talking about an audience that overlaps between types of games, and they have much different behavior in every single group. Like if you're going after people who are supposedly hardcore gamers, the first-person shooter gamers of the world, or the people who religiously do the 2K games or the Madden games. I mean, those people are much, much different in terms of the way that they approach their games when they're playing those games. But when you put them on a mobile phone game, which all of them are doing, they act like every other mobile phone gamer. So it's not as easy a bucket thing. And I bring the question back to you, Augie. I mean, it's just like, why do marketers have such a problem understanding that it's not just buckets of people who are like serious gamers versus mobile gamers, that it's more of a fluid thing where an audience can change behaviors based on what game they're playing?
Well, they should be able to figure this out. This isn't any different than TV, right? We don't target TV people, right? We
Right.
target people who watch certain shows, because the people who engage in those shows sometimes tend to have some somewhat similar sorts of behaviors and attitudes. Somebody watching Days of Our Lives is not going to be necessarily the same person who watches Mr. Robot. Now, as it turns out, my wife watches and loves both, but that still is a mechanism by which we can begin to understand that certain people with certain values may gravitate around certain things. Now, I happen to be an avid gamer. I just finished Sniper Elite 4, so I was shooting people in the head from 200 yards away. So I'm one of those people Saul was talking about. But the thing that I think is interesting is that because I am an avid gamer of that sort, that certainly means that people who have games that might appeal to me would want to advertise to me, right? That's one way of thinking about it. Some of these games have advertising opportunities within the games. Now, I tend to kind of object to that in the more expensive games, but we've grown very, very used to it in the free mobile games like Candy Crush and the like. They're ad sponsored. So to me, it's just that this is still what some people think of as relatively new, and I just don't think the mechanisms are in place to really understand, is there a difference between somebody playing BioShock 3 or Sniper Elite 4 or Call of Duty Modern Warfare as opposed to Candy Crush or Angry Birds, in the same way that the networks today do such a good job of making sure that advertisers know who's watching their shows.
So let me ask you, Aki. So you're a self-proclaimed avid gamer. How many hours a day do you spend on Twitch?
I have never gone to the Twitch thing. So and this is part of how different people game. I'm not a massively multiplayer game. I do not game to test myself against someone else. I have done a little bit of the multiplayer. Nothing is more fun, I think, than dropping into a environment and being shot in the head by a 6-year-old who then calls you a noob. And so I tend to gravitate to single player games that are more driven by story. But as a result, that makes me a different kind of gamer than would go on Twitch.
And your
Once
answer,
again,
Augie,
different strategies for different people.
Augie, your answer is revealing that how little you are targeted correctly by advertisers, because Twitch is not a multiplayer network. It's more of a YouTube network where people watch other people play.
What you're really doing is watching the people doing the competing, though, right? Very
Well,
little of what I've
to
seen
a
on
certain
Twitch
extent.
is people playing single player. What they like to do is watch other people compete against each other, just like sports, right? Twitch is more of an esports sort of network. It's not people generally playing single player games by themselves.
Well, but the point remains, and I think you're both making a fantastic point with that last conversation, that last interchange. I mean, you look at a hardcore gamer and you think, okay, well, they have certain behaviors. They are probably going to be interested in Coca-Cola, and they're probably going to be interested in new hardware for their gaming rigs, and they're going to be watching competitions on Twitch, and none of that is true necessarily with you.
Right.
It's just like that.
Yep.
Yet you're still an avid gamer, and I think that's where the breakdown happens. We assume that certain audiences are being able to be grouped together in that way, but they're not.
Gamers are no more homogenous than TV watchers or moviegoers or millennials. We've got to get out of those coarse demographic sorts of labels and really begin to focus at the nuance. Now, I just think there's still lots of opportunities to target gamers of different sorts of games on different platforms, to sell them more of those sorts of games, or to find out if there are similarities that advertisers might use, given the opportunities that the games present. I think there's value there, but no, I mean, to just say that somebody's a gamer is almost meaningless. I mean, virtually everyone today is a gamer of one sort or another.
So how do we break down these walls and start to understand the gaming audience? I mean, is this more about day parting? Because you bring up the TV example early on, Augie, about the fact that we understand with television that certain people watch certain programs and that we can market to them. But the gaming audience is much more complicated because we might have a whole bunch of people who are interested in certain content who are not necessarily of the same type of desires, of the same type of marketing opportunities. Is this a matter of trying to figure out what the day parts are in terms of play so that we understand if they're playing during the 3 o'clock hour, we know they're after schoolers, and so they're probably younger people. And then we go into the evening hours, like after 10, that's probably getting into the older audiences getting involved so that we have a much broader audience. I mean, is that the solution? Do we need to be thinking about this more in terms of day parts and when people are playing?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I do think that there's a fundamental difference between games and TV, in that TV comes through a network or, of course, nowadays an app, perhaps. And then the network or the app maker offers advertising, right? And so they have a vested interest in understanding who's watching one show versus another and making that clear when it comes time for ad buyers to buy their media. I mean, I use the example of Sniper Elite 4. We could use any game. It was created by a group called Rebellion. Rebellion, to my knowledge, doesn't offer any advertising, right? So there's no desire on their part, or a necessity, if you will, to know who's playing Sniper Elite 4 and how that's different than any other game they may offer. And so I think that's part of the question. It's why you're probably seeing more in terms of understanding who the gamer is on things like mobile, where advertising is a lot more common. So I do think there are just some challenges here, where the networks from the TV angle really had a necessity to understand who was watching so that they could get premium ad dollars from media buyers. And a lot of the game manufacturers just aren't in that same situation, which I think leaves advertising agencies then tending to think of that coarser demographic of gamers instead of really trying to crack the nut a little more.
Well, it's fascinating, and the gaming world will continue to be fascinating. We'll keep our eyes on it. But I want to move on to our final topic of the evening. Finally, are Facebook ads becoming too expensive? Some of the brands that have built their names and businesses through the power of this platform are concerned that it has become too expensive. So I think it's like 72 something percent raise in rates year to year. Augie, is this the natural maturation of the platform, or is something else afoot? What's going on here? Why the price hikes? What are they trying to say with these price hikes?
Yeah, well, the one thing first of all, according to the article, it was 90% in the last year. It's gone up. Now, that was the Facebook network, not on Facebook. But to me, it's kind of a ridiculous topic to talk about ads being too expensive. There's almost, to my knowledge, no more perfect economic marketplace with transparency than the ad buying market. The Wall Street may beat it by a little bit, but the point is that prices are set by supply and demand. If ads were too expensive, then ad buyers wouldn't be buying them, and the price would come down. So all I can assume is that these ads are doing what people want them to be, because the two assumptions when you see this kind of a price increase are either these ads are really working and marketers are measuring what they're getting from it, whatever their goals may be, from awareness to clicks and conversions, et cetera, or marketers are really just terrible at their jobs and they're buying because they think they have to, and they're not measuring, and as a result they're overpaying. I tend to think the former is true and not the latter, but I've got to assume that people are smart, they're measuring this, and that's what's driving the price up, in which case it's not too expensive.
There's
I
go ahead,
also
Saul.
think that Facebook justifies it by, and I'm sort of parroting what you said, but a little differently. They're really hiding behind return on ad spend. So, they're saying, well, what does it matter if the ads are $1 million an ad? If you're getting $1,100,000 return, you should be happy. The problem is, though, there a lot of people will be priced out of buying that $1 million ad, and they're not $1 million. Just using a nice round number, but there's a lot of people who are being priced out of it, or leveraging their whole businesses because they think this is the golden ticket, and they don't really know what they're doing. There's a lot of proprietary, not proprietary, what does it mean when you prey on people? But there's a lot of
predatory.
Predatory. Thank you. There's a lot of predatory agencies that are really like milking companies out of their last dollar with like over promising and under delivering. And we're gonna find ourselves in a place in a couple of years where there's only going to be 25%. I'm just making up a number. Brands that could even afford this perfect way of finding your customer and targeting when like there's unlimited inventory. It should be there really isn't that much supply and demand. Of course there is for keywords and certain things and certain people, but we're still talking about digital assets. We're not talking about a billboard or a 30-second TV ad that you can only put in one spot. So
Saul, I'm curious though, do you believe, so, we've always talked about the long tail of advertising and marketing and search and whatnot. So the $1 million, those are going to be the giant ad buys with enormous quantities and as you point out, the most desirable audiences. But do you really believe that it will exclude advertisers in that way? Because of course there's always going to be the long tail, the micro buys, the audiences that maybe the big guys aren't interested in, but you are. I'm curious if you think that that'll balance out or not.
I don't believe it'll balance out. I do believe that the smart people are going after long tail. I don't know how many people are going after long tail anymore. Like it's all about immediate wins and living quarter to quarter to quarter. And I don't really think that there's people, even at the CMO big brand level, worrying about long tail a year out, maybe 2 quarters out or 3 quarters out. But I believe in it. But, I'm going to give you an example just from my own experience. I have ongoing Facebook ads for my own business that run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't put a lot of money into it because my budget isn't enormous, but I think every day of stopping them, because even though I've spent hours meticulously targeting the people I want, and, of course I'm not bidding up, so I'm not getting the quality, but I've clearly put on Facebook that I only want to speak to people in, like, not only do I only want to speak to people in North America, I only want to speak to people in 7 different downtown metro areas. And I'm still paying for ads that come from Brazil and Russia and all over the place, of places I've specifically triple checked that I shouldn't be targeting. So do I think this is a great way to market? Absolutely. Do I think it's perfect? So far from it. Do I think it's too expensive? Absolutely. Because even when you do the homework and know what you do, they're still providing you really, really messy leads.
Something else you said, Saul, really resonates with me. I mean, let's go back to this. The pricing out of smaller brands is all about trying to attract the bigger brands. I mean, it's just like the idea is supply and demand, like Augie said. So the price goes up, which means that in theory, Facebook should be attracting the bigger brands. And yet, up until now, most of their ad revenue, and Augie, back me up on this, most of their ad revenue has come from the DTC crowd. And if they price out the DTC crowd in favor of the big brands who have not traditionally used them as much as the smaller brands have, these smaller challenger brands, are they really going to get the Fords and Pepsis and Cokes of the world to pony up the same amount of dollars that the DTC brands are? Are they setting themselves up for potential fallback?
I don't know if that has as much to do with targeting one type or another. It's just that the DTC brands obviously have the metrics, right? They count the clicks, they count the conversions. Ford and Pepsi and some of the others have to rely on those softer metrics. And we've seen Facebook try to do studies and that suggests that there's recall and that changes people's buying behavior. But Facebook and frankly all online advertisers continue to struggle to bridge that gap. We've seen some maturation and some tools that can do that by bringing everything together in CRM platforms. But it's always going to be, as we all well know, I mean, especially for a considered purchase, there is a lot that goes into that. It's not going to be as easy as I saw an ad, I clicked on an ad, and thus it was really successful and it was worthwhile. So the DTC brands, I just think, have the opportunity to measure more directly. And as these things get more expensive, it certainly calls into question whether the brands that are looking more for awareness and consideration rather than just purchase are going to be able to play. But, that's the monkey on Facebook's back to demonstrate that they can bring the data together in a way that demonstrates that these things are worth the investment.
So I'd even go further and say, where else do DTC brands have to go? You know, but and from a big brand standpoint, they've already been burned historically by Facebook with the groups and the fan pages and all those things. So there's probably a little bit of bad taste. They're still there because they feel they have to be there, sort of from some Me Too advertising and just sort of own their stake. But I think historically through the shifts of like the early days of a lot of these big brand social media presences were built on the back of Facebook, and then all their fans, all their likes, all their users were pulled out from under them. It's not that hard to believe that the same thing isn't going to happen for D2C brands.
Yeah, I think of Zynga. You're exactly right. If I've listened to this show and I've been on the show enough to know that, people talking about the dangers of building your business model on someone else's platform is discussed on a very regular basis, as well it should be. But, the other thing to just say about DTC really quickly, I just recently did some research on them, and very, very few of them, possibly none of them, are actually profitable. For all of the buzz about DTC strategies and everyone's got to do this, and this is a big thing brands have got to consider. You look at all the big names in this space, and they're all struggling to get into the black. And if they need Facebook, and if Facebook ad prices are going up 90%, then getting into the black is going to be very, very hard.
Well, good conversation, but now it's time for us to go to this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we do that, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do their shameless plug of the week, starting with Mr. Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. That's the home of the Idea Integration Company. Tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote?
I don't know if I was any good on the show today, but if this is the first time you're hearing me, I swear to you, I'm super smart. So I run a non-traditional marketing agency. If you're tired of paying for Facebook ads, you want to create some really outstanding experiences for your brands, marketing stunts, spectacles, experiential things that are literally going to get someone to turn to 10 of their friends and say, "You will never believe what I just saw." You should send me an email, drop me a line, check out my website, theideaintegration.com. And I know that our website isn't very good, and how you should interpret that is I'm so busy with clients that we don't have time to worry about our website. But trust me, we're really good at what we do.
And they definitely are. So give Saul a call. Give Saul a call. I can't say. I tried to do Colt and call into one word. It didn't really work. Okay, Augie Ray is next. You can find him at Gartner.com. That's where he blogs. That's where he consults. That's where he does all kinds of amazing things in the customer experience realm. Tell us what's going on in your world, Augie. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, I'll just say that it's the time of year where you start looking ahead to the conferences you want to attend. We're already busy on the Gartner for Marketing team planning our large marketing symposium in San Diego, June 1st to June 3rd. We've got 9 tracks: digital commerce, demand gen, customer experience, strategy and innovation, branding and value, and others. So if you're looking for, I'm biased, but we certainly get lots of terrific feedback and measure this every which way we can. But if you're looking for a really good marketing and customer experience conference to attend, June 1st to 3rd, just look up, just search for Gartner Marketing Symposium online and learn a little bit more about our event.
Yeah, and the Gartner stuff is amazing, so definitely check that out. As for me, the only thing I'm going to say is the same thing I said last week. It's that time of year, and if you're getting a lot of value out of this show and the things that we do, there are things you can do to help us out. First thing, last week I asked for people to email me. Some of you have, and that's fantastic. I love hearing from you, and I love hearing whether or not this show is having an impact on your business. So keep those emails coming. I really appreciate it. It does lift me up and makes this entirely worthwhile doing. I also say that if you want to advertise on this program or know someone who wants to advertise on this program, definitely get in touch with me. That's another way you can help the show out tremendously. And I have gotten some solicitations on that front this week, which is great. And the third thing you can do is if you want to go to thebeancast.com, that's thebeancast.com, there are two ways to donate to the show. You can go to my Amazon wish list and get something from there for the show. There's equipment, there's gift cards, whatever you want to get. And then, of course, if you want to donate to the show, there's a donate button from PayPal right on the home page of the website. So those are the ways you can help us out this holiday season. I operate on a shoestring, and I would love the help if you feel so led to do. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Aviation Gin, which is Ryan Reynolds' company. The actor, in case you don't know who I'm talking about, capitalized on the infamous Peloton ad, and they did so in spectacular fashion. In 72 hours, they managed to take this germ of an idea and turn it into a fully formed advertisement that went completely viral. It featured the same woman from the Peloton ad. They managed to get her to come over. They didn't trash Peloton, but they made it seem like she was in a support group of her friends.
They kind of trash Peloton.
They kind of trash Peloton, but it's just like, but put her in a scenario where she's in a support group with her friends drinking, and it's like she's leaving her husband for seeing so bad. It was just so on point. Augie, you seem to want to say something, so I'll let you take it over.
Well, I thought it's just absolutely brilliant. The speed of it is spectacular. It's a beautifully produced ad. It's funny. I think and the thing that's so important is it's not just the gal from Peloton. It's really a sequel to the Peloton ad. The thing that I wonder about, and I know you don't want to turn us into a giant conversation at the end here, Bob, but is this going to force brands to pay more for talent to buy up their ability to do something like this? I've got to think that Peloton is upset, and I wonder if this young actress could potentially damage her chances at other things if brands think that she's not going to be reliable. Right? I mean, is there a loyalty that is expected of actors and actresses to the brands that pay for them to be in ads? I don't know. I just find this all fascinating.
I thought the woman did herself a huge disservice by doing the ad, and I'm going to go the other direction and say I thought this was an awful ad. Everyone's sort of like cheering that it was so brilliant because it was Ryan Reynolds and because it was quick, but the woman isn't famous enough to even, like, I didn't know that it was the Peloton woman. They make no reference really to Peloton in the ad. If Ryan Reynolds wasn't part of it and people weren't sort of saying like, hey, he's so adorable and he's so hunky, I guarantee you we would be talking about this in such a different manner. It's almost like, well, he's not a pro, so let's treat him a little differently, or he's so gorgeous, let's treat him a little differently. This is not a good ad. I showed it to 5 people and nobody recognized this woman. The tie back was not strong enough. They should have, if they're going to do it, they should have went all the way to the end of the spectrum and had her in a Peloton t-shirt or had her on a bike or something, because it's just 3 women drinking gin, not saying much. And that's what the ad really is going to look like in 3 weeks.
And for me, though, it was, I didn't take it as an ad. I mean, as an ad, it's a terrible ad. It's just like, it doesn't really do the callback really well. But
it's a stunt marketing.
But from a stunt standpoint, if you do get it, you really do get it. And as a viral video, it's really super effective for people who do get it. And it really, I mean, I think that not getting into the callback so strongly was doing a service both to their brand and to the actress, because it wasn't trashing Peloton as much as it was just doing, as Augie said, a sequel to the first ad and giving you an opportunity to play a little joke on Peloton without necessarily slamming them. And I think that's all fair. That's all fair and good in this scenario. It's not like the Verizon guy suddenly working for Sprint, which is, in my opinion, a pretty crappy move on his part. But I think in this case it was handled so tastefully, really well done in my opinion in the end.
Can I really quickly add one last thing? And we talked
Sure.
earlier about personas and knowing your audience, but a lot of people were upset about the Peloton ad, and it tended to be people who believed that the woman, who picked up a vibe that the woman was maybe being mistreated or felt like she had to record herself for her husband's purposes, and that he was buying her this to keep her thin. And so there's a strong thread of empowerment going through there, and that's exactly what they picked up in this ad. And so I don't know that anyone's ever going to see this ad standalone in the way that you talk about, Saul. I mean, I could be wrong on that. But I think for those who know, I mean, the ad perfectly appealed to exactly the people who had a concern about the Peloton ad. And so that's, to me, what I thought worked so well.
But it introduced new concerns, because I put a little rant on Facebook similar to my objections to the ad here. And one of the comments, and I'm going to say, I think this is, I don't want to belittle the person, but I think it's taking it a little too far. But they said that the person who commented on my Facebook ad said they were triggered by the fact that she was drinking alcohol, and they're recovering alcoholic. So, like, you can't.
You can't please all the people all the time.
You can't please anybody anymore, but yeah. Okay, moving on.
It's a terrible time to be a comedian. We've said it many times. All right, next up, the fail of the week. Disney, of all people, gets caught in undisclosed influencer marketing effort in Japan. Apparently, they hired a whole bunch of anime people to say they loved Frozen 2. Unfortunately, none of these people disclosed that they were paid to make these comments, and as it turns out, they all made pretty much the same comment, which kind of gave them away. I don't know what the laws are in Japan, Saul, but it seems to me like this is not a good light for Disney to be found in, is it?
Well, first of all, no one loved Frozen 2, so that should have been the first tip off.
Oh, wait a minute. Frozen 2 is breaking box office records. It must be good to somebody. I mean, I can't say that I necessarily would appreciate it, but let's give credit where credit's due.
I just think it's so interesting that they would even bother at this point with like these backdoor stuff. Like, Frozen was a phenomenon. Like, Frozen 2 was going to do well no matter what. And, like, I don't know, I haven't seen either Frozen movie, but my impression is it's for like 10-year-old girls. So, like, why didn't they just pay a bunch of 10-year-old girls to say it was really great? If you're going to write the tweets or whatever, the status updates anyways, make it like, make it a little bit more fun. But I just thought the whole thing was ridiculous. And I will even go as far to say that I have no information on this. There's no data or facts behind it. I bet you someone high up didn't know they were doing this, because it just doesn't smell like Disney to me. And maybe I'm just and I'm not a Disney fan or apologist. It just like,
I agree with Saul, actually, though. I agree with you. I think this was an agency that got desperate because their little corner of a campaign needed to perform. I suspect that. But I mean, again, I've got no data or facts on it. But I do feel the need to channel the very famous line from Casablanca that I am shocked to learn that there are brands paying for influencers to tweet about them without paying. Shocked.
Without disclosing. Yeah, absolutely. All right, the foul of the week. E-scooter startup Unicorn. What a name, Augie. First, we'll just go with it for a second.
That was aspirational, I would say.
Yeah, e-scooter startup Unicorn proves once again why crowdfunding is a magnet for suckers after they shut down without delivering a single one of their $699 vehicles. I've been screwed by a Kickstarter program in the past. I've been screwed on a couple of occasions, and it just seems like this is not something that is tenable going forward. We've talked about crowdfunding as if it was the second coming for several years now, and I think people are starting to realize it is not, and that this is just the latest of some really bad things to come in this space. What's your take on it?
Well, listen, I mean, crowdfunding is not going to go away. the era of the internet has been of one hype phase after another. Second Life was going to change the world, and MySpace was going to change the world. Now social media really, in fact, has. Do you remember the era where everyone had to have mayor
Yes,
specials? Groupon is
yes.
going to change the world. So I have been through enough of these where none of this is really surprising. Of course, the fact that people could pay for something that was still only under development or possibly only a dream was going to come back and bite us. I've tended to have some good luck on some of these. I have never been ripped off, but I haven't participated a lot either. I don't think these things are going to go away, but I think that maybe people are beginning to get a healthier sense of how much they need to be asking questions and protecting themselves. Caveat emptor in crowdfunding more than anything else.
So I'd also say a couple things. One, kickstarting or like crowdfunding is not a business plan. And how many companies have we seen that have just raised enough money to get their initial product out and then realize they didn't even have a business afterwards because they have no money left in the bank, no marketing plan or no anything. So like companies stop, like do it the harder way. It makes it harder, but you'll actually build a business. Two, I'm just glad that they apologized. They took the $3.5 million they raised, and they probably had a really great year or a couple months of parties or whatever, but they apologized, so it's okay. And lastly, are we really surprised considering that this is a product from the people that invented tile, which has been used like by stalkers and date rapists to basically drop a tile in someone's like pocket and then follow them home and do awful things to them. So people, please stop like buying things on crowdfunding.
Wait, is that true? Because that's not the way tile works. Because tile doesn't connect to any network. It only connects to your phone. So when you want to find something, you can only find the last place that your phone and the tile were in proximity to each other, or at least that's my understanding. Anyways, we don't have to go there. I was just interested.
Well, I'm not sure whether or not, but we'll just say allegedly at this point so that this show won't get sued, and we'll move on and say, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online, use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.